trying to sneak in, Your Worship.
Right. I'll declare the meeting open and I'll read the prayer. We ask that through Council's discussions and decisions, the representatives we have elected may govern the Far North District Council with imagination, skill and wisdom to achieve a fairer and more united community that enhances the well-being of our district and solves the district's problems efficiently and effectively. Amen. Now, any apologies and declarations? I have an apology from Matty. I'll move. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Dave. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you, no, carried. Now, we have no deputations. No announcements. I'll come back to those. Okay, so we'll come to page 12, confirmation of the minutes. Also moved. Do I have a second, please? Thank you. Rachel, are there any comments? The floor is open.
Your Worship, page 15, Maddie Ruddock, missing an H.
I beg your pardon?
Maddie's surname is misspelled.
Oh, right, okay. Note that, please, and correct it. Any other comments? Not, I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. No, carried. Thank you. Sorry, I thought I heard somebody. Right, we'll come to 6.1, the petition, receive the petition in the Seawall on page 34. And also move the receipt of the same. Do I have a seconder, please?
Yes,
thank you. Several. Any comments?
I could comment, Your Worship.
Please do, Kelly.
Thank you. I received the petition in Pioneer last month on behalf of Council, so this is just officially receiving it for an action which I understand there is some work behind the scenes to respond to this. Yes, so it would be good if I could have some clarity, or if staff are getting back to the petitioners on what the action or response is going to be and when.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Happy with further discussion. Thank you. Thank you. I've just got a list here of, thank you, Kelly. Oh, sorry, Rachel.
No, it's no problem. Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to raise that going forward, it would be great to look at the petition guidelines we have within our organisation. I note that especially the second petition, I had some questions around the information shared, which by the petition owner, which sets the pretense of why people and what they are signing the petition for. For example, the messaging that the project is to create a beach, when us around the table know that it is a lot more than just creating the beach. So it would be good to have that conversation going forward as to what the expectations need to look like in receiving a petition. I also note in the second one that there was just a requirement for a postcode, so it leaves it really open for us as to whether or not we can verify that information with those signatures, especially because that form didn't require for that postcode to be verified in itself. So going forward, it would be good to firm those guidelines up. Thank you.
You could ask them to actually sign it and put the credit card number on.
I'll note that as a joke, Your Worship.
Mr. Chair, we've also got this on the table, so I think it'll be doing both at the same time.
We're receiving both.
Thank you.
All right. Listen.
Thank you, Richard. I just wanted to note that I think this is a reflection of communications and how potentially Tunnel Holdings needs to provide as much information as possible up front to the public, so there aren't those misconceptions about what may be happening, which may be a deviation from reality. As we're aware, there will be a consenting process, or there is a consenting process, so that's not something our district council will make any decisions on. I think it's important as well that the public realise what decisions us as elected members are entitled to make within our delegation, and what the role of Whānau Holdings is opposed to that.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. All right, no other comments. I will put the motion. All in favour, please say aye that we receive the petition.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Carry. Now, I'm going to move on adoption of the long-term plan on page 156. And in moving it, I just want to acknowledge the work that elected members have done. We've had 30 plus workshops, and thank you all, each and every one of you, for your inputs. Really appreciate it. I particularly want to thank Sean, you and the staff. And I know that there's been some issues just more recent. I mean, there are always issues, but there are more recent issues regarding roading funding and so on that have taken the time, and Cheryl and Janice particularly, so that they could be working with the audit, which of course has happened not just with us but across the nation, and it's become a major problem. So I just want to acknowledge that and just have that recognised, please, and just note the work, the good work that's been done by the staff when it first was prepared, when it went out to consultation. And thank you, Anne, for chairing those meetings, consultation meetings, and for each and every one of you who've been involved in. Thank you. So I've moved. Do I have a seconder, please? Anne Cord. Kelly.
Point of order, there was an amendment.
Yes, that's coming in the setting of the rates. Kelly, do you want to make comment now or at the next motion? This one?
Yeah, now?
Yep.
I want to speak to
the floor is yours, young lady.
Okay. So I really just wanted to take the opportunity to highlight for everybody that's not on, that may be listening or watching back, that this long-term plan was probably, it was more difficult than the last one that I was involved in, because we were, beginning the process in a post-COVID environment. And we also have the imminent reforms, so around Three Waters, local government and RMA. And we've been in the throes of a district plan review. So we've had a lot of funding pressures, and we've done so much in the last 12 months. I know from speaking to staff ad hoc that they've punched above their weight in delivering the capital works program. And I just, there is an increase in rates, but there is an increase in, I'll try not to be as candid as I was yesterday, an increase in getting the work done. And a lot of systems have been implemented and followed through on, so we are seeing the results of that, but you are going to see it in your rates bill. And the public have had an opportunity to have a say on the priority. So we did soft engagement last year, and then we did the consultation this year. And whilst there has been, like the last LTP 3 years ago, nothing's changed. The main priorities are drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater management. We see the impacts of stormwater not being managed properly when we see egress into the wastewater network. And there are things happening behind the scenes to address that. making decisions with a long-term focus is really hard up here because we've seen years of us not being resourced to, put things in place, to not be reactive all the time. But we have endeavoured to make some decisions that are long-term focused, and we've seen that in the doubling of our budget to address the three waters. What was once, 40 million over 10 years to be spent on wastewater is now, in the hundreds over 10 years. So my highlights in the LTP one is the tsunami alarms, and because that's something that you don't think about, just like you don't think about the council when you flush your toilet and it flows down to the wastewater treatment plant, or the toilet you flush with an on-site septic that gets emptied to one of our 13 wastewater treatment plants, or the conveniently located public toilets you can use around the district. So as Three Waters portfolio holder, I'm really happy with the change of the last two LTPs to this one, and us prioritising our Three Waters assets. Some of the challenges ahead, and so it's very costly for council to do an LTP, but we are likely to be doing a change in the next year, an amendment, because of development contributions, and because the last 5 years we've seen central and local government looking towards what local government's going to look like and what Three Waters looks like. We're likely to see a change in our priorities. So whilst the rates are high now, they could go down the next LTP, maybe. And one of the other highlights for me is finally getting to address the stormwater issue in Moerewa. It was really unfortunate that we weren't able to deliver it last year, but I'm looking forward to it being delivered in the next 12 months. I think I've taken less than 10 minutes, 5 probably. But I just want to total what you said of me about our elected members fronting up for the consultation sessions, but also all the mahi that goes on behind the scenes from our staff, and really remind the public that these are human beings that work here, and so are we. And whilst we might not get everything right, everybody's doing their best to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Kelly, you
wasn't going there. I mentioned it in sweeping it when I talked about the
I'm going to
plan.
go. Hang on, I'll just take Rachel first, then you, John.
I'm just wondering if this is part of the debate we're having now, or just general discussion?
I'm speaking to it.
Well, speaking to the resolution.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. First LTP under the belt. That's pretty massive. And Moko and I were talking yesterday. I think one of the lowlights for me in this LTP is seeing the photos from the beginning of this term versus today, and the records that have formed and how much we've aged. So I think I just wanted to acknowledge that first. When I read this LTP, I think I was quite proud of the fact that we go through this process and there are some massive frustrations thinking day to day that you are not making any change whatsoever. But when we look at this LTP, we've set some pretty incredible foundations in terms of what the decisions for our district, regardless of what we're going to be facing over the next 10 years through the various reforms that are coming at us at various speeds. So I really just wanted to set out with that and talk all the words that have already been said about the mahi that has happened in this room over the last 8 to 10 months from everybody collaboratively. It's been an absolute privilege to be a part of that, and to sit here today that not one of us has any bad blood between any of us. Has been a respectful, enjoyable, frustrating but beautiful process to be involved in, and I feel really, really good about that. I really wanted to acknowledge the approach that we've taken in the headings from a bilingual point of view in this LTP. I think that in itself sets a huge tone for what we've managed to achieve, and that has been led by this council. I'm really, really proud of that, and I hope that that change continues to happen regardless of who's sitting around this table next term. I also want to, like Kelly, acknowledge the massive financial commitment that we've put in place to secure the way that we intend to work with Māori going forward. There is some huge relationship work that needs to be done there, but we've put our money where our mouth is and we've made that commitment. So I'm excited to see what the next steps of that might look like. The commitment to our waters over the next 10 years is something to be celebrated, I think. I questioned every single day whether or not we were doing the right thing and whether or not we were doing enough. And I think, as Kelly has said, we wouldn't ever be able to do enough. There's no such thing as a perfect LTP. We have so many things to balance perfection with, and we wouldn't ever strike that. But I think we should all be really, really proud of the investment that we're making into our district, knowing where we've been coming from over the last 2 decades. I'd love to have seen more investment into our strategic growth projects, but I also acknowledge that we have to get our ducks in a row first and the importance of that. And so to see that we're investing further into Project Darwin, and I look forward to seeing that come to life over the next few while so that we can strike a development contributions charges section to our policy, bring that back in and start looking at how we balance affordability going forward, because that's a massive, massive challenge, not only for our district, but for the sector of local government going forward with the structure of the rating legislation as it stands. So as much as I would have loved to have seen more investment there, I feel really good that the council following us, no matter what that looks like, will have some really good foundations to work with. I do have some really significant concerns about the risk to our transport networks, and I want to take the opportunity to thank Deputy Mayor Court for the work that you've done in this space, and I know we'll continue to do heavily in this space over the next 12 months on behalf of Northland. We know that we have to expect a decrease in our level of service. We also know that Northland already suffers a decrease in our level of service comparative to the rest of the country. So I think I want to acknowledge the tough conversations that we've got ahead of us over the next 12 months as to how we strategically respond to that, not only for the next 3 years, but also long term and what that looks like, knowing how reactive we have to be to the funding model as it stands. I think the highlight for me in this LTP, and we haven't shouted it loud enough in these documents, but I don't think we could have ever shouted that, is the investment that we're taking on our challenge and our journey with climate change and the way that we adapt with that, the way that we work with our communities to adapt to that, but also the way that we plan to mitigate that from a council point of view, what we're looking at doing to reduce our greenhouse gas emission levels and the footprint that we put into our country. I'm incredibly proud of that work. I'm incredibly proud of the team that did that work before this and that we got that in place for this LTP. So I feel really, really good about that. Project Darwin is another highlight for me, but I really want to focus on the communications and engagement process. We saw a really great report to my committee last week in terms of the learnings that we've taken from that process from an organisational point of view, and I know that we're just going to keep leaping and bounding ahead in that space. So I'm really, really excited about that, how we look to bring our communities on our journeys with us better and better every single day. But also balance that with actually being able to make hard decisions, because that's what we're elected to do here. We can engage and we can consult until we're blue in the face, but ultimately the buck stops with us. So I'm really, really proud of that communications and engagement process, and just want to give another shout out to the amazing team that did the mahi on the ground for that every single day. There is one last point that I'd like to point out, and on page 120 of our long-term plan, it talks about the governance and strategic administration. I wouldn't have made it through this LTP without the support of our governance support team. I'm going to get quite emotional about that. There are 2 bullet points in this LTP that talk about what that team does, and they could never, ever be enough. So I just want to acknowledge the huge amount of support that they give us every single day, and thank you for that. Thank you. That's a pleasure.
Kia ora. Thank you, Mayor Carter. I just wanted to raise a few points. Probably one of them is it was really great to see. Kia ora e wai, Rach. It is really great to see our average residential rates are $17 less than the national average. We're also sitting slightly on the cheap end of halfway of the other provincial councils. So just a reminder that I know that a lot of what I hear from whānau is, you know, our rates are so expensive, but actually when you look across our country, they're not, which is comparatively, which is good to highlight, I think. I also just wanted to pick up for whānau watching, but also for the next council and the next council's coming through. Every LTP has to have a kōrero in there around working with Māori. And our last one had some really great things in it, the last LTP, which I wasn't a part of, and this one does too. And I want to make sure that these are more than just words, but there are great ones that I highlighted, like providing Treaty of Waitangi training for all elected members and staff, I think is really important. Providing an annual contestable fund to assist two Māori in the whānau to attend the Making Good Decisions course is really great indeed. Provide annual contestable funding for the development or review of iwi hapu environmental management plans, I think is really worth highlighting, which is in this. We're going to work hard to make sure that those can be actioned and that the benefits of those will be felt across our district as well. Finally, you know, we all contribute different things across this table, and one of the lovely kōtai that I bring to this table is that I'm a teacher. So it wouldn't be an official council document without a table of possible corrections from me. So I just wanted to say that it didn't go. It is way better, so much better. But I did sneak through a sneaky table through to the staff. So kia ora shiu, and it's not to say to staff that, you know, this red pen came out, because the mahi to put this together is beautiful. But I love the fact that we're going to macronise our town names in this document. And can I just point out that Kaitaia is on 47 of our 200 odd pages in this long-term plan document, because I went through each page to find it. So, kia ora.
Well done. Just so you know, you're talking about the incoming council, 79 days or 69 days, I think.
469 days.
How many seconds?
Thank you, Mia Kara. Just generally speaking, look, this just so the public knows, everybody realises it, and they probably can appreciate what's being said, that this has been a very difficult long-term plan. We consulted on a lot, including capital rates. And I don't particularly want to lose the good work that the staff did on looking at capital rates and an easy way to go into it. I think that should be looked at. And why do I say that? Because, and also I should say that this long-term plan, when we were doing it, we were very aware that what we are doing is probably going to significantly change. In fact, there's a high probability that it will change, because you've got the Three Waters reform, which is a significant part of our spend, as you see, necessary, and that's likely to go to some large entity. You also got the whole reform of local government. What does that look like? We went through that process in the late 80s. So what you see today is not likely to be there in just a few years' time. So there's going to be another process that goes through it. And I get a bit fearful, because as the government did with Auckland, they forced capital rates on us, and it was a capital rates there is. So that could actually have a surprise to a lot of people, what could actually turn out to be like. There are a lot of good things in there. The staff did a lot of work. I think the strategic side of it that Rachel raises is extremely important. You need to know what you want to achieve, not just an election cycle or even the 3-year, 10-year plan. You've got to look at the big picture. There have been some things I've long advocated for that we still haven't done, and that's a disappointment. I think Mayor Carter talked about being locally led, government being locally led. And so, in a nutshell, our consultation can be done better by looking at each community. And use those words, government use those words, community, mana whenua, and so on, and to get right down to that level and specifically engage with them, put them in the running seat to determine what is their priorities, what they should be done. And that's my only criticism, really. We haven't done that, and that's caused a lot of angst, and dare I say it, that's probably been some of the results of some of the Eastern marches you've seen, which could have been avoided. And as we get bigger, and I don't know what the future's going to look like, as we get bigger, I was hoping that before that stage occurs, which is looking inevitable, I would love to have seen us put in place a clear way of doing this as an example to the rest of New Zealand. And I still think we should be pushing that hard. And as the example of visibility, we talk about well-being, and of course it comes down to a community of well-being, community there, and how are we addressing those? So it would be nice, and I think that was some of the comments, to actually have communities be able to specifically look at what the long-term plan means for them. And that is not clear and obvious. It means that they would be holding our feet to the fire, which I actually think is a good thing. Anyway, that's what I think what we have has taken a big effort, and it is our best shot. And I don't want to be negative, I think a lot of good work's been done. I'm just quite keen to set a real example, think outside the square and be innovative in what we can achieve.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to endorse what everybody has said, because I think that it is all relevant, and I would not expect to be quite so articulate as the previous speakers. Probably from me, I acknowledge the work of the staff, and management staff and staff, and our elected members who've worked so bloody hard. We've seen very often the stress that comes with this, and the emotion, as Rachel demonstrated today, attached to this. I think that that's absolutely awesome. You know, we've debated, we've had numerous workshops, consultation, and then we've come to compromise in terms of decisions and commitment. But what I think that we started out really looking, well, we started out with a CRZ, and we've got as close as we can to a suitcase in terms of this. It's not necessarily the full silk piece with the zipper on it, but it's getting close. And I agree with John that there are changes that will come as well. And who knows, we may or may not, that people around us table be a part of that.
Thank you. Felicity and then Dane.
Thank you, Worship. First of all, a few of my colleagues have acknowledged the staff, and I'd like to thank you for that. I think that all of those people that are thinking about taking on a role as an elected member in local government need to be aware about how much work goes into a long-term plan, and that when they're elected, they can't just come in and make whatever decisions they like, because in local government you have to set that in 3-year cycles, and if we're going to change that, then there's significant workload to do that. So first of all, I just wanted to acknowledge that, and that the second thing is the significant output we've had. And a few of the other elected members have recognised this, but the political climate and the fact that COVID has occurred within this cycle has meant significant reactivity or reaction in a short time frame. And I would like to provide my thanks and appreciation to our CEO and the staff for being agile in this space, and for what I feel is one of the highest delivery throughout all of New Zealand. So if you look at our council compared to other councils throughout New Zealand, we would have had one of the highest amount of funding provided from central government, both to our council and to our CCO. And our community is the one that will be seeing that right now with the outputs in our Capital Works program and through our CCO. Well, it will be designed and will be currently being constructed probably this summer, if not next summer, we will see the realities of that. And I do recognise that our rate increase higher than I would have liked, but on page 157 of our agenda today, one of the bullet points recognise that that is also a reflection of central government change. So the financial strategy, our council financial strategy, shows the rate increase to be lower than 6.79% at 3.44%, due to the corresponding reduction in the number of rateable units. So our council is one of 2 councils in New Zealand with a large area of Māori land. Our government do not provide us operational compensation to recognise this, and I hope that through the changes to local government throughout New Zealand, which central government are initiating now, that they allow for that, because operational costs are the ones that affects our rates the most, and by reducing the size of that pie, by reducing the number of rateable units, that means the burden goes on to our other ratepayers, particularly as we've seen with our rating review, our rural ratepayers, if we're looking at changing, for example, the UAGC, the Uniform Annual General Charge that each rating unit pays. I know that that's getting down into the detail, but that's the truth of local government. The other truth of local government is that we're the messenger for central government. We've seen that with SNA, we've seen that with Three Waters reform, we're seeing that now with the changes to the funding for roading, we've seen that with the Whenua Māori Amendment Bill. I'm not sure how much local government can take in terms of change within such a short time frame in local government, and our ratepayers are expected to pay that financial burden to do so. So I just wanted to recognise to those listening that we often do not make up this stuff that we have to enforce. It's pushed upon us with no resources from central government, and that I welcome the central government reform of local government, because this is not sustainable, it's not affordable in the long term, and I would hate for our district to have that financial burden to be the messenger in ongoing years. So,
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Morena koutou. Yeah, just reflecting, it's a bit like a third reading speech where all the real arguments have been made. You know, the consideration, the amendments have been won and lost, and we've deliberated. And I have to say, in all honesty, I can't love this document. There are things in it I wish weren't, and there are things missing from it that I'd like to see in it. But I'm sure any one of us could make that same statement. So it is the outcome of a fairly robust democratic process. We've all participated, and as I say, we've won a few and lost a few. So it is what it is. It will be criticised, no doubt, and some people will see good things in it and others will not. And that's how it is. I guess we've done our best collectively and individually to come out with something that's realistic and achievable. We'd all like to do more, but we are constrained by funding, by resourcing, and by the, as one or two others have mentioned, this extraordinary array of change that's being imposed on us in an unreasonably short time frame. I would hope that people, ratepayers, residents, citizens will be aware that there is an extraordinary change coming that is being done in, as I say, an unreasonably short space of time. Started with the Three Waters reform. I recall in December last year, one of our first engagements with central government about Three Waters, there was a direct reassurance there was no agenda to reform local government. 5 months later, a review panel was established to look at reforming local government. So there's a level of, I won't say dishonesty, certainly a lack of transparency, I think. And I do have some concern that I think a lot of this reform project has been made up sort of on the run, and that's never conducive to a good outcome. So I hope people in amongst their own lives will also have some awareness that there is a substantive program for change, as we've seen, Three Waters, the RMA, the abolition of district health boards, and the form and function of local government over time. So I would hope, and amongst everything else that's coming at people, I heard it referred to actually at an event recently, the 4 big disasters we've confronted this year, which was just the Northland, which was drought, COVID, flood and the Labor government. I won't possibly comment on those. But it is true that we're facing quite difficult times ahead, I think, and we do have to be aware that, well, I would encourage people to engage to the extent they can, because inevitably local government will cop the blame for a process that is not of our making, I have to say. So, yeah, that's probably enough for me. As I say, it's been a good process. We've had our arguments, and we all, I think, can still enjoy coffee and sit down together as friends or colleagues. So, and I think that's important, that the process is such that we can act professionally, agree to disagree on occasions, but still come out of it with some semblance of being a coherent and a group of people who are looking to get the best for the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Carter. I'd just like to say on behalf of the community board chairs and our communities, I'm sure Belinda will agree with me, but I'd just like to thank you all for inviting us to the table to participate in the workshops, to feed into the long-term plan on behalf of our communities, and it's been most appreciated. And honestly, we've got a really good plan in place. And thank you to all the staff who worked so hard for this, and the councillors for making the decisions on it up as well. Thank you.
Yes, I would just like to echo your sentiments, Adele. And thanks to you all, both staff and members, for the inclusiveness of community board chairs and deputies at times, particularly in the workshop, for the learnings, for the annoying questions that will continue to come. And I think, you know, we're all here for, it's about the people. And at the end of the day, I think you've done the best you can do, and I hope you have. And just, I suppose from a community board perspective, it's just a case of, if we are seriously wanting to empower communities, don't lose sight of the financial empowerment that you need to give us on this day to enable us to continue with our placemaking journeys and working with the people.
Thank you, Belinda. And thank you, everybody, for that discussion. I think that was really useful and good for those who are listening. I see Peter Graf down here busily writing away here, getting a good report for us. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Well, it's important. I mean, one of the challenges we have is communicating with our people, and it's an ongoing challenge that we have. And I think one of the important messages, and apart from what were our aspirations for the district, I think one of the most important things is getting the community to understand the changes that are upon them. And it's not just the Three Waters, it's not just our district schemes and the likelihood that they'll be put into 14 different authorities. It's also issues like the SNAs that are going to have a huge impact. And pursuing that, as you're all aware, I'm working with some of you as best as we can, but there's major changes, and David referred to health changes as well as changes in education. There's a whole lot happening. My biggest concern with all of the changes that are taking place is the local will go out of local government and the community will lose its voice. And that's something that we have to be quite strident about as we develop things. So thank you all for that. So with those words, it's been moved and seconded that we pass the resolution on page 116. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. It's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. So we now come to the setting of the rates, which appear on page 162, 178. And there is a slight amendment in regard to the EE sewage capital rate on page 164 and to the district-wide sewage operating rate. You can confirm if I'm wrong, on page 166. And I just, we've got the figures, there's the altered figures up on the board. If you have a look at them, all they're doing is reducing one and increasing the other, but it has the same outcome. So it's just a correction. Right? just so you know. So the heavy surge capital rate will drop from 596 to 467, additional pan rate from 358 to 280, and then, am I doing it right? And thank you. And then on the district-wide, the rate will go up from 615 to 617 and 369 to 370. So I will move that resolution. Do I have a second, please? Thank you, Councillor Court. There's no comment on those.
Can I see the change in capital district-wide rate, please?
You can just repeat those, please.
Just that last question you showed.
We showed the capital. So this is PE surge capital.
There's very little movement.
Well, the surge, yes, but for the district-wide, it goes from 615 to 617.
Yes, okay.
$2. And $1 for the additional pan rate. All right, if there's no other,
Sorry, Your Worship, just for clarification, would we be able to hear from staff just the commentary around this? Unclear as to why we need to make a change.
Janice, do you want to just
I don't have any opposition to it, it would just be great to hear.
make a quick comment as to why?
Yeah, we found the calculation error this morning of $21,000 in the ED rate. And because there's a low number of ratepayers, it was felt to be a substantial change to that rate. So we're suggesting that we move ahead and make the change then.
Thank you, Janice.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. It's not specifically about any of the numbers in this, but I wanted to acknowledge the staff, particularly in the rating area, that considered a change to our rating system, and we did a huge amount of work on that, a huge number of workshops. The staff did a huge amount in various different departments, and the decision was to not change the current rating system and what this relates to. But I wanted just to give recognition to that. One of them is the stormwater rate, so that did propose to change. And so that there's in recognition of development rights in terms of stormwater within the stormwater area of benefit. And so we've got some of our very talented staff, Janice, and we've got Cheryl here, and I just wanted to, through our CEO, give special recognition to them and all of their work and effort. And although we, as a council, decided not to change our rating system, that I wanted to recognise that we looked at all the different avenues and we looked at all the different methodologies, and no stone unturned about that. But we've listened to our community as well. So just wanted to do that with our CEO today.
Make that comment. You got a comment?
No, thank you. My queries were all answered through Janice. Thank you very much.
I did.
Oh, sorry.
Based on that, I just wanted to make sure she went. Yeah, page 169. I see the due date, the penalty dates, tip of the day, which is fine. But for Kaiko, it's the 20th of 12th due date, the 27th of the 12th, which is right over holiday and Christmas period. Any way you can shift those dates slightly? It's just a bit.
No.
It's an awkward time of the year.
Janice, you're telling us no.
No, due to the way that we have to bill, those dates can't move. But as I mentioned to Member Ward yesterday, ratepayers can arrange for payment plans so that they're not having to pay it on that due date. They can spread it over the year and make regular payments. And they can do that at any time. You don't need to be in arrears to have a payment plan.
Okay. Anything else?
I just Kaiko gives the council a good Christmas gift at that time.
Thank you. Moko?
Kia ora. Thank you, Mikara. I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to just reiterate the fact that I think it's unfair that Kaikohe Hokianga ward has a higher ward rate. The ward services rate, council, from our LTP we just adopted, council levies a targeted rate to all suits in each ward to fund urban, recreational and other local services and activities within the ward. So it's for our levels of service, and our levels of service should be the same across the far north, but we're paying differently. And then anecdotally on this side, our level of service is less, but maybe that's attributed psychologically to the fact that our ward rate for these services is more, so you'd expect more. I'd like to see a future council consider abolishing the ward rates. I know it's the difference between us and Te Heku is only $85.50, and between us and Bay of Islands Whangarua is $46.30, but that's a lot of bread you can buy, and I know that Jesus with only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish fed the population of Kaikohe, so it is a big difference. So I just wanted to raise that. I also know that we, in our representation review, we're looking at some households in Pakaraka and Waimate North will be moving to Bay of Islands Whangarua ward, which would mean that their rates would go down, which would be a plus for them in our next annual plan, because that will come in by then. I just think it's a little bit dated. It's different to like the other differences in ratings over your wastewater treatment plants or your freshwater treatment plant, all that sort of stuff. This is for services that we expect across our entire district. So I just wanted to use this at the moment to bring that up. Thank you.
I think every year I raise the issue with the way that we bill, and we've got a system in place, there are processes, and just like what Councillor Vusic and Member Ward have raised, the billing cycle for Kaupua, they're paying their water bill and their rates at the same time, and it falls for another couple of areas like that on one of the other instalments as well, and it's just we've got to make sure that we get the information out to them proactively about payment plans, but I think we also need to see what else other councils are doing to make it more friendly. And just, what did you say? You said something, there was one other thing, but I can't remember it. I'm sure it's important. Oh, the rating review. Just because we made a decision this year about, not going capital, not going, not dropping the ward rate, doesn't mean that we've stopped. We're still wanting to, when we do the development contributions LTP amendment, perhaps we can look at it again. And it would be really helpful if staff advise us on how we can make sure that that process can be done, so we can look at it again. Thank you.
And you certainly can. I mean, nothing's digital. It's really important that everybody understands that a decision made today can be addressed tomorrow.
Yeah.
And especially in 469 days. You can get on that. All right. Okay. Thank you. Any other comment? If not, I'm going to put the resolution with those alterations. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Just a final comment about us having the regional council rates on our rates bill as well, and the fact that these rates are going up. I think it's approximately 10%. And again, we're the messenger. Is it more than 10%? Is it 20%?
It's 22.
22%, there you go. So on the rates bills that has our logo on it and has the number at the bottom of the page, a lot of the public perceive that to be FNDC's rates bill, when in fact it incorporates both the regional council and the district council. I'm not sure how we can make that clear that we are not making these decisions about the regional council, rates bills, and maybe we should consider them sending out their own separate rates bills, because I know it's a perception issue, but I think that really needs to be considered if the regional council rates are going to be going up by that much each time, and that we're the messenger.
Okay, thank you. I mean, obviously we can, but I make 2 points. There's a cost saving in this, not sending out 2 rate demands, and the second thing is that it's likely that
maybe 2 separate pages.
swap the logos.
It's also likely that in the future there'll only be one authority across the north. So, won't there? All right, I'm going to put the resolution. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you for your involvement and participation and interest. I really do appreciate it. And as has previously been said, that while we may have different views on different issues, the nice thing working with this council is that it's never personal. And I really appreciate that. And so thank you. Right, the next thing we come to page 172. And we have here a NRC Northland Inc. I'll move the resolution.
Your Worship, we need to put some names in at the.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Right, have we got any?
Mr Mayor, I'd like to nominate Councillor Court as the shareholder representative, recognising her very high workload, but ideally this position, I won't say it's just a figurehead role, it's a significant role, but it ought not to carry a significant workload. And I think it's appropriate that the other two councils have appointed their, respectively, their deputy mayor and deputy chair to the role. And I think Councillor Court's experience and general background would make her an appropriate person to fill that position.
We'll just write that in, and in then we also need to put
to you, Your Worship. So the reason for having the other one is because the way the joint committee works, that there's two people from each council, so there's a consensus view. It makes sense that all of us have one standby, so that if somebody's missing, we don't miss out on that. The second reason is it's kind of a risk as well. So as we head towards the next election, this joint committee will continue on, and the joint committees are public, so whoever decides they'd like to do this can attend. They just won't have voting rights unless they're substituting for one of the elected members, but it means we have a pool of people post-election that council may choose to go from. Thank you.
Are you volunteering, Bill?
Your Worship, may I suggest someone from Te Heku Ward? I know that way there'll always be two different wards represented at that table.
Yep, right, well, none of someone.
Thank you, Ponky. I'll let my colleagues look at each other.
Does either of you want to put a hand up and volunteer? Your hands in your pockets?
Well, I haven't put that all on, so maybe I would volunteer for this.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do recognise that Councillor Ranich isn't here today and he's not on any council committees. Maybe a share of the workload might assist him in that role.
Cheryl, thank you.
I'd be happy to put Councillor Collard.
I'll second that.
So,
Okay, so we've got two names. Thank you, Councillor Court, for drawing that to my attention. So we've got Collard and Court. So I'll move the resolution with those two names. Is there a seconder, please? Thank you, Court. Okay, any further discussion?
Your Worship, I'll just make some comment because I did copy you all into an email that I sent earlier in the week after I had finished reading the Williams legal opinion. I didn't have governance comfort at that point that the ratepayers' financial interest was sufficiently protected. I wish to acknowledge Councillor Clendon and Bill Lee for spending some time with me yesterday and looking through my questions, and I now have governance comfort that the ratepayers' financial interest is protected. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, David.
Yeah, just briefly to say that John and I have been involved in this process, and it's been a good process. I think it's been very cooperative. There's been goodwill from all the councils. We do look forward to the day potentially when Whangarei District might choose to become a shareholder in Northland Inc as well, and the door's wide open if they do choose to. But in the meantime, it's been quite enjoyable actually working with councillors from from Kaipara and from Northern Region. And I must acknowledge Bill Lee, who's done a lot of work on this on our behalf, and other staff from NRC and Kaipara also. So I think it's been a good positive process, and I look forward to a good outcome in terms of the economic development. And we've inserted a fairly strong commitment to sustainability in the statement of intent and all the conversation we've had about the long-term aspirations of Northland Link's actions. And I think it's been a very positive thing. So.
Thank you.
Just adding one further comment. Councillor Clinton covered most of it, but it's just I think of late, many would have seen, especially as we see our road needs and various other things, there is a need for a united voice. So this Northland Link there, being there, reaching out to other councils and actively being engaged, it just gives us that power and government.
Thank you.
Can we just ask a question?
Sure.
Just with regard to, these positions and all our other portfolio roles, I think it would be really good if we could make sure that as governance and there's key staff involved in those, we could get allocated some time regularly to give updates. I'm endeavouring to do mine written, but it is a struggle time-wise. So just...
Thank you for that, Kelly.
Because I don't want what happened last triennium with poor communication about some projects, elected members not knowing what's going on. Yeah, that's all.
So just for everyone's attention, and in fact I'm going to do this just before we close. As you know, I do mayoral announcements, and it occurred to me the other day exactly that, Kelly, that one of the things that, subject to everyone agreeing, that we have an issue that a member is particularly involved in, and I'm thinking of just using an example of the beach board. It may be that we say to Councillor Rovich, you've got a 2-minute comment on what's happening in the beach board. Just, Kelly, just exactly what you're saying, so that councillors can go around the table and say, well, last week I was involved in this and you need to know about it. So pick that up, Kelly. I think you're quite right that we do need to make sure that we're informing, because there is so much happening. I'm just going to make a comment. I just want to thank all the councillors who have been involved in this, because I haven't been, and I just haven't had time to, and I just, I trust you to do the job right, and I accept it entirely. So it's been moved and seconded. If there's no other comments, I'm going to put them up.
On page 173, in the shareholders agreement, I just wanted to note, for those who might be interested in this, the background that Whanganui District Council decided not to be a joint owner. And I mean, that may change, and that's recognised there that should they do so later, the shareholders agreement allows for that. I think the whole intent of the process was for all the councils to be involved with it, and Whanganui District Council was chosen not to at this time. I do recognise the vote was close, but I do feel disappointed about that, and I would like to see a local office, particularly if Whanganui are paying, then maybe the office shouldn't be in Whanganui. That would be just my feedback, and so that people understand that they're not currently part of that committee. So I'm not sure if there's any feedback about that.
All right, thank you all. Any other comments? Otherwise, I'll put the resolution. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, no, carried, and I think that's a wonderful step forward. Thank you very much. Just before we close, I just wanted to run through a few things that are happening. So, and these matters will come before us in an official way. We have the issue of the release of the Kaitaia Airport that's been resolved or evolving, progressing. I just wanted to bring up that. Next, we're in the middle of quite interesting discussions. We're making progress. I can't say it hasn't been without a bit of tension, but we're getting there. And we had a further session which you couldn't attend yesterday, and Sean and I now talking about the aspect. Roadie, Nancy, to give us any update on road?
We have Jeff Devine in the room. He's a subject expert matter far greater than I. I'm going to chuck him under the bus. You don't have to comment yet, but it might be helpful for our colleagues to hear from you.
Can our roads take buses? Some of them.
Thank you. Councillor Worship. So councillors are probably aware that we had.
Sorry, are you just able to come to the front there? Thank you.
Just the camera, Jeff. Councillors, you're probably aware that we've been notified in recent weeks about a potential reduction in our funding for roading for the next 3-year program. We've only had a one figure notification of the expected funding for our program. For Far North, we applied for $105 million in our maintenance category for the next 3 years, and the NZTA have indicated they will pay about $88 million over that period. That is compared to about $73 million that was the last 3-year program, so it is a slight increase. But with escalation costs in our contract, it is likely to only allow us to maintain the current level of service. In the asset management plan we developed, we had a number of improvement programs identified, and some of that was unsealed roads, bridges, drainage, some catching up on some of our backlog of resilience programs. So it is very unlikely we'll be able to achieve an increase in the level of service for those activities. There are some items in the program that we're not aware of yet, but NZTA have indicated they will still be looking at some of the activities we are proposing in our program and to look at whether they will approve those individual elements, which means some more of our funding could be at risk as we go forward through the program. NZTA have told us they won't approve the final budgets until September, so that does cause us some problems in planning and getting started for the year. They have indicated they will provide interim funding from the 1st of July to allow our normal operations to continue, but again that will potentially delay our progress and impact very good performance we provided for the councils for last year. But we are working strongly on that at the moment to try and get some of the work started to ensure we can maintain that level of performance, and we're reasonably confident we'll be able to do that.
Thank you for that update. Any questions, Jeff?
Yes, please, Your Worship. So roads that were earmarked for, say, upgrade of base course, whatever that's called, and these are unsealed roads, to improve the base course. Is there going to be any opportunity for governance or, to make some informed decisions around whether they can wait another 3 years or whatever it is?
So as part of our plan, what we've identified in the app we had was a program of improvement for our unsealed road network.
Yeah.
And that, again, that's something we proposed the last LTP as well,
yeah,
which wasn't funded last time. And the indication is they won't be funding us for that additional money to allow us to do that. What we will do, and it's very difficult because we don't know any detail yet, it's really hard for us to make decisions at this point. What we will do is when we get some more detail in the NZTA, we'll come back to council and put a paper up that says what we asked for, what we intended to do, what what has been paid, what the implications of that will be, and then how we recommend that council then goes forward and spends the available money that we do have to meet our plan to maintain and improve legal services on the road. So we're well aware of what the community have asked us to do, and we've tried to incorporate that. But obviously, that's about it.
Okay. And just
it's about nearly $20 million shortfall over the 2 years, so it will have a significant impact on what we can achieve.
just one final question. The you mentioned that the unsafe network improvements weren't funded last LTP. Was that a decision here, or Waka Kotahi wouldn't include it?
What happened last time was Waka Kotahi, NZTA at the time, said we didn't provide sufficient evidence to justify, I think, an additional $10 million for our unsealed roads. They did, however, give us an opportunity to go away and develop and resubmit that information. However, before we could do that, before we could finally submit, they came back with a budget cut and reduced the total program and didn't allow it. This time, through our AMP process, we did submit suitable evidence for that program of works, and NZTA worked with us and agreed that our evidence was suitable. But again, this time they don't have the funding across New Zealand to fund everything we'd asked for.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. You make the point you're not getting the money you think you need, but there is a bit more than was in the pot last year, which the government is at some pains to stress. Would you hazard a guess at what is the percentage increase in construction costs from here and over the next several years? Because I'm aware that it's sort of a good time to be a roading contractor if you're looking for work. There's a lot of it about.
So my understanding is that most councils allow the Burl indices as an inflation increase in the LPP, their funding. One of the problems we face in roading is we only get to do this once every 3 years, so we have to make an estimate of the inflation that our contracts allow. So each year our contracts are entitled to an inflation adjustment for their costs, and we have to allow for that for the next 3 years, because we don't get a chance to come back and do that. So my understanding, most of our bids to NZTA included the Burl indices, which is what financiers here to do our LTP. We do that on an annual basis. So we've done that at this stage, and that wasn't done. But there's another slight problem that we face going forward, is that people are aware the refinery is shut down in terms of being able to choose bitumen to use it. And so our bitumen, instead of coming from the refinery, now comes from either Tauranga or from Plymouth, and that's imported by 2 different companies at the moment into those ports, and they pay a spot price when they import it. So there is likely to be a bitumen increase, which affects a lot of our work, and there is no allowance in the to cover that. NZTA are looking at that on a nationwide basis, but basically we'll be up to paying whatever the current spot price is.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you for that. I noticed in a recent report that our roads, compared with the other one network classification roads, and is in a poor state. And I've also noted that the maintenance budget is not holding its decline, so we have an asset that's eroding. To me, that's a huge financial risk, and we're throwing on the future generations to bring it up to speed and to bring it back to where it was. And I think it's just not right. And certainly, you would also be aware COVID highlighted supply chain risk. And now that we no longer have, as you pointed out, bitumen being produced in New Zealand very efficiently, might add, least carbon emissions. Now we have to cut it all the way from south, and of course there will be a rise. And so we are going, so halting the decline of our road standards It can catastrophically collapse on us, which is going to be hostile to some future development and into future rate. That's a big concern. You want to comment on that?
Councillor, you're right, that's an issue for us. And I think it's fair to say on behalf of Waka Kotahi that they have given us more money than we had last time. So one of the things we have to do is sit down and work out how best to spend the money we have to achieve, to maintain the level of service as much as we can. And you know, we have a lot of money invested in our roads, particularly our sealed roads. And if we let them run down, then you're right, that's a passing the cost on to future generations. So that's our role, to come back and recommend to council how best to spend the money we have. The way we run our contracts, there are some we have to cover escalation. There are some lump sum payments that we make on a monthly basis which are set, which we can't change. And it's really the leftover, what's left over after that, we then have to consider where best to spend that on behalf of the council and various parts of the network and various activities we do to try and maintain the level of service for our community. And it's not the end of the world, we can do that, we will do that. We may have to make some compromises, but that's our role, we will do that. I think the disappointing thing from our end is that we put so much effort in a series of improvement programs to provide a better level of service to match what the community have asked us over the last few years. And a lot of that work, and then we're not going to be able to do it.
And I appreciate everything you're doing. I'm not taking any comments at you.
No, that's one.
I just thank you very much. That's great, because we can give you the staff worldview. Now I can give you a political worldview. And some of you have heard this before, and I apologise if you're going to hear it again. So the way that regional land transport plan is structured is that under the Land Transport Management Act, the regional council is responsible for putting together a regional land transport committee. And that is one representative from each of the authorities within the catchment and two representatives from regional council, and regional council must chair it. That's the structure, and then within the structure, the rules sit in the Land Transport Management Act, which says that these guys here must produce a management plan that justifies the funding bid. So you put in your funding bid through Transport Investment Online, announcement in the last
November was our first draft, and I think around February was our final application.
And during that time frame, that bid is moderated. So Waka Kotahi representatives sit down with us and they go through it all and they say, you need to justify it. It's like an audit. So at the end of the day, when we arrive at $105 million, that's defendable. That is what we need to maintain our network and achieve the levels of service. So it was with a very heavy heart that I attended the Regional Land and the Royal Controlling Authority Forum in Wellington last month, and I have got an elected member's report coming to you on that. And we were told by the Chief Financial Officer of Waka Kotahi that pretty much they were broke. And I printed off last night his presentation that he made to us at that meeting. And it talks in there, you won't be able to see that, but that's the affordability challenges that we are facing, that they are facing. So the government has determined that there will be no increase to fuel excise levies and no increases to road user charges in this National Land Transport Plan period. But they have added rail and coastal shipping to the project that must be funded out of that pool. It's important that you understand that that pool is created by fuel excise levies, road user charges, registration, tolling and ground leases. So the only people putting money into that pool are car and truck drivers and motorbike drivers. They're the only people putting money in the bucket. So that bucket now has to go a whole lot further, including the recently announced electric vehicle rebate scheme. So the up to $8,000 you're now allowed to claim on your new electric vehicle will be coming out of that bucket of money. So that bucket of money has been stretched incredibly thin. Waka Kotahi advised us that due to significant cost overruns on projects that they are currently delivering on the network, including Transmission Gully, which is now doubled, has meant that up to 80 to 90% of forecast revenue for the next regional land transport period out to 2024 will be required to address funding shortfalls in the previous 3 years. That has meant they have a total of $500 million available to the Board of Waka Kotahi to spend moving forward into the next funding round. That is a very scary position to be put in, and this is all available to you online. You can go and research yourself under the Road Controlling Authority. They don't believe that they're going to get back to the same position until about 2030, according to their modelling. But at the same time, in the post-COVID world, people are driving less. So the money that is going into the bucket is reducing, and you just heard from Jeff, the cost of maintaining and constructing our roads is escalating. And for those of you who are with me in Whangarei, I put this question to the Minister of Transport, and he said that he had asked the Ministry of Transport to commission a study into the sustainability of the funding, that they would scope that up this year, but he expected that would take 5 to 10 years to complete. So I think we have a real crisis looming, and last week I had to abandon Councillor Smith's committee, and the Chief Executive and I sat in on a Zoom call, and my notes from that Zoom call said, quote, reduced levels of service are not off the table in the future. Some hard trade-offs will be required. A further quote, we recognise that this funding will have a negative impact on death and serious injuries on the network. The presenter, the Chief Financial Officer from Waka Kotahi, said to us at the meeting, Board of Waka Kotahi had to make the least worst decision. So I think this is very frightening for us moving forward, and I need to say that Waka Kotahi is 100% funded from the bucket. So their projects get funded first, and then what available funding is left is what we fight over.
Including rail and
and then on the other side of the ledger, you're all aware that, or you may not be aware, so I flew down to Wellington the night before the conference. The guest speaker was the Minister, and I worked with my partner in crime here on a follow-up question. It was quite funny because I was sitting at a table of 4 and this nice gentleman was sitting beside me, and I was talking to our lady from the NTA on the opposite side of the table. I said, I've got my question ready for the Minister. And the man beside me said, God, I'm glad I don't have to answer that one. I apologise, that was blasphemy. I'm really sorry I don't have to answer that one. And then they said, we're now going to introduce the Chief Financial Officer for Waka Kotahi, and he stood up. So that was a little bit awkward. But the night before, I had a phone call from Steve Munn saying the Minister was now not going to show. And that they had a half an hour slot to fill in the morning, and would I stand up and fill in that half-hour slot as one of 3 panellists to talk about how rural and provincial New Zealand can help the government achieve their objective of climate change, reducing the transport freight task in rural New Zealand. So that was a big challenge. When I woke up that morning, I turned on the breakfast TV to hear that the government were going to fund a $765 million walking and cycling bridge over the Waitemata Harbour. And I thought, oh, good on Auckland, yay, I'm happy for them. That's great. Then I rocked up to the conference and I received, Anne, you need to know it's embargoed, but it's going to be publicly released at 9:30 this morning, that we're taking the four laning off Northland. So I went into that conference with a very, very heavy heart. I certainly told everybody at the conference that we were not happy about having our projects pulled. And what is of bigger concern to me, and I know I'm really waffling on, but anyway, what is bigger concern to me is that I just explained to you at the start of my speech how we're structured and the rules of the game that we have to play by. Jeff and Andy and everybody in the team have to sit there and just about sign away the life of their firstborn to get money. Waka Kotahi will go through our business cases with a fine-tooth comb. We know how long it takes to get a project funded. With no business case, with no adhering to policy at all, with no consultation with anybody in Northland, the minister, with a one stroke of his pen, took our projects off us, and replaced them. And that is of serious concern. And I try really, really hard to maintain good relations with my politicians, because there's no point brassing them off. But I'm brassed off. I'm brassed off on behalf of 71,000 people in the far north. I'm brassed off on behalf of 170,000 people in Northland who need that four laning. And rail from the port to Auckland is not going to help one single avocado grower, one single kiwi fruit grower, one single berry picked at our new farm over here. It's not going to transport one fish, one flower, one bit of produce, or one log north of Māori. So we need to stand up and tell the government this is not okay. Oh, that became really political. I'm not going to apologise for that, because I'm really angry right now, Your Worship, that this has been done to us, not with us.
Thank you very much, Anne. I've got to say, goodness gracious me. Right, Felicity, thank you, Anne, for that. It's great. As clear as a bell. I hope you got everything of that down, Peter.
Gosh, hard act to follow there. Our very own Minister of Transport for the panel. I just wanted to raise something with our asset manager here, Jeff, and asset management was one of the things that we could improve on in the far north. So I think that asset management and having Jeff as part of our team, one of the best asset managers in Northland, is a huge success story for the ETA. So thank you for that. But I wanted to sort of follow on from what my colleague, Councillor Busick, raised about bringing our roads up to speed, when in effect we're not. And if we look at what is currently proposed for, number one, our state highways, a speed review for the whole of Northland. And the reason for that is because people are dying of crashes and serious injuries on our roads. And that's a direct result of the condition of our roads, our state highways and our local roads. In Tiku, we have Kaitaia Aurora Road, which, if you look at the whole of Northland, is one of the highest deaths in serious injuries across the whole of Northland. And how are we going to improve this without any money? I mean, the government policy statement is supposed to be one road, one network for the whole of New Zealand. How can we not be upset about this? In effect, what this budget announcement is telling our area, our Northland, that people will die of deaths and serious injuries on our roads as a result of this, and that doing a cycleway over the harbour bridge is more important in terms of the budget announcement. So I wanted to support what Councillor Quarters raised, but also recognise that for our ratepayers, and people know this, that we have a huge number of unsealed roads. So what I would like to see as a council is looking strategically about our investments. What are the nice to haves and what are the must haves, and how that's attributed to our unsealed roading network as well. From dust, we know that that's a serious health concern, but also for our base course width, depth. So our roads, without doing heavy metalling, are going to be reducing in quality over the next 3 years. So I'm not sure, Jeff, as the asset manager, how you can comment on our unsealed road network and also on the speed review.
Yeah. So, as I said before, we will come back with a recommended program for council as to how to spend their money. Probably a point I haven't made. So the budget announcement today, or the funding announcement today, is for what we call our maintenance, operations and renewal, which is only part of our budget. The other parts of our budget is what we call the low-cost, low-risk program. So the council today has just approved the LTP, which has $11 million a year in that bucket. That hasn't been reviewed by NZTA yet, but the indications from them is that's part of the 90% budget that's already committed. So we're fighting with the rest of New Zealand for the rest of that. So we've got $11 million in our budget annually, and that covers all the projects under $2 million, which they put into one thing. So the outlook is not very good for that. What they have indicated, though, is that the Road to Zero program and walking and cycling are high priorities for the government. So potentially of that $11 million, some of our projects are Road to Zero for safety. So we're hoping that we'll get that funding, and some of the walking and cycling projects that council's got in its LTP, we're hoping some of them may get funded as well. It's the rest of that $11 million program we're concerned about, and that covers a number of other activities. Our footpaths are in there, and minor improvements. The other category, the third category, is our over $2 million projects. And that's major capital, and that's not very good either. I think in terms of funding, we may only have one or two projects in that category going forward. But basically, that's our capital program, and that's not looking very good. But again, we will come back to the council and say, with the money we have left in our program, this is where we recommend that we spend it going forward, and that will give the council an opportunity to have a look and say whether or not you agree with that, if that's what we propose. The other thing is the council still has an unsubsidised program, so our unsubsidised seal extensions and other activities we have would are not affected by this, and council can choose to carry on with those programs to spend the money.
Can I just ask Jeff to expand on that, because with the decreased OPEX budget moving forward, there will be an impact if we spend capital.
Yeah, so the MO&R, I call the MO&R, is our maintenance plus our renewals program. So that's our rehab, rebuilds and our reseals. So that program has been cut as part of this budget. Yeah, there is a bit of a problem in that as we build new roads, we do seal extensions, the maintenance requirements for those new roads carries on into future years, and at the moment we could almost say we're not funded to look after the current roads we have, and therefore creating new roads is going to increase the problems for us. That will be part of the program we bring back to council to say, this is what we need to do to look after those new roads and the existing roads to maintain levels of service and to keep protecting the council's investment. It's not very good to build a brand new road and let it run full to bits. We can't buy that. But again today, council will give you an opportunity to look at what we propose, which will be based on the asset management plan we've already done, but with the reduced budget.
Thank you. Felicity, you've got one.
Oh, just one final question, Jeff. A few people have asked me about the Kyo Bridge, because we were promised a few bridges for a number of years. We've got our Taipo Bridge, we love it. We know stuff's been happening in Kyo. Are we going to get our bridge?
So the funding impact also does affect the state highway program, and that's separate from the council's program. The RTC process, all the regional projects, both local government and state highway, are listed nationally, and then they basically go down the list until they run out of money and fund it. So I can't tell whether or not the state highway projects will or will not get done. They have some funding risks as well. I think one of the things in terms of the GPS, the government increased the maintenance bucket for state highways, and I think it was a fair degree nationally of people saying the state highways aren't good enough and they need to spend some more money, just doing some basic maintenance for it. And so that my understanding from the GPS is they have put more money into that bucket so the local council, so the local state highways can upgrade. So again, I don't know because it hasn't been confirmed, but we're hopeful that will continue to flow through. Whether it flows through to new capital projects for the state highways,
In September.
in September is when they formally announced the program. We're hopeful that we'll get some indication before then so we can start our planning a bit earlier, but September is the formal date.
Can I just have a comment on the Kyo Bridge? We get regular updates from Walker Bridge and Hay, and at the moment they are still planning to proceed. But as you may have observed, on the same day they announced the funding of the bridge, walking cycling bridge over Waitemata Harbour, they cancelled a whole bunch of projects in Auckland, like the Mill Road link. So it could be, because they haven't started yet, they could still cancel.
All right, well, thank you very much. In fact, I did hear, Jeff, that part of the reason for reducing funding on roads is so that the road standard becomes poorer, so people drive at a slower pace and it saves reduced accidents. I don't know whether that's their logic or not. Incidentally, when are they going to announce the cycleway walkway bridge from Whangarei to Kaikoura? Is that shortly? No, sorry about that. Can I just say, by the way, everybody, 5 years of NTA, happy birthday. Congratulations to all of those who have been involved. Sean put some weight on yesterday, he ate part of the birthday cake.
Everybody who was here yesterday except Williams has got
ate the birthday cake. But thank you for coming up. We really appreciate that update. I've got to say, having that discussion like this, unfortunately we had plenty of time this meeting, but it's been a useful discussion just to inform. So thank you very much. We appreciate what you do. You can tell the team our grateful thanks, please.
Thank you.
Okay, I just, bearing with just doing Merrill comments. Mayor's Task Force for Job, young elected members, Moppel and Rachel, do you want a quick update for us, please, on either or both?
Thank you, Mikata. I was lucky enough to attend the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs core group meeting last Thursday down in the capital. I came home before they had their troubles, and it was a really good meeting, and there are ongoing discussions. One of the things that Rachel and I always bet for our council is that a lot of the funding that comes through gets targeted to rural councils. Now we're a provincial council because we happen to have a big population of 70,000 people, but if you look at our individual communities, we are very rural. We meet the rural trend, so we have been in discussions with them about being able to be included in these funding projects, and there is scope there that we can be. So those discussions are ongoing with staff, and it will be really exciting if we can action some of those to the tune of, I think it's quite a bit of money anyway. So that's really exciting. We have been invited to attend the Festival for the Future, which is a huge kaupapa down in Wellington and
End of July.
the end of July once their troubles are over, and that's really exciting that Rachel will go down to represent our council there at the Festival for the Future, and there's scope for us to also take along our Tuia mentee Justine at the same time, which is really cool. I'll leave it up to Rachel to fill in any gaps.
Thank you. Just before Rachel does, I just thank you both for the work you are doing in that regard, and say that Rachel, the representation of the young elected members is being in standard. She's part of this local government New Zealand, which is great. And she is, I don't know whether we can announce at this stage or make any comment, but the young elected members who he's still being involved in, I think. Anyway, forward.
Thank you.
I'll take my word,
and thank you, Councillor, for giving that off. The one thing that I would like to add to that in terms of Mayor's Task Force for Jobs is the success that we had with working with the Kaikui and Hokianga Community Board to get some outstanding rangatahi from this ward down to Outward Bound this year through a scholarship process. That's a really cool initiative that we were able to work solidly with the SPP team on to get into place, and I'm really excited about the potential of what that partnership framework might look like, working with our community boards, operational and council to get really great outcomes for our young people across the district. So just wanted to give a shout out on that.
If I can just quickly touch on that, we pay the Mayor's Task Force for Job fee of, I think it's an average of around like $2,000. Just sending 3 rangatahi down to Outward Bound, that's over $10,000 in a scholarship, so it's already paid itself off in dividends. So.
Yeah, there's no question in my mind. It's a really positive thing for our people.
And just on young elected members for Local Government New Zealand, we've got some really hard mahi going on with Future for Local Government reforms and inputting into that. And Councillor Tipuna here and I were due to meet with our committee over the next day and with the Future for Local Government panel as well. So we'll be having some really good conversations with them on that. And as Mayor Carter has touched on, FNDC was able to rustle a bid together. Thank you, Cheryl and Bill and the team for that mahi. And we have put a bid in to host the young elected member hui in the Far North for 2021. And we are sure that we'll be able to make an announcement on that hopefully in the next few days.
Perfect, thank you. We'll keep it for the 1st of July meeting. Thank you. I've got down here Beach Board. We had a Beach Board meeting. I've got to say that it's disappointing the lack of representation from some of the iwi that come to it or don't turn up to it, which is unfortunate. They are going through the process now of putting speed restrictions on the beach, and there's a whole lot of negotiations, discussion. I was going to let Matty talk to it, but he's not here. Just to tell you, there'll be a paper coming to council next week on remits for the Local Government New Zealand conference. Housing, Sean, we're getting a date for earlier on that, aren't we? Got a date for it somewhere, I just can't remember, but it's housing.
It's 22nd of July.
Yep, good, thank you. Civil Defence, Kelly or David, anything you wish to update us on that?
I don't think there's anything further than has already been said. Thank Kelly for the tsunami warning system funding. So I appreciate the fact that it was done at that last meeting that I was at, and of course the controller from Parliament District Council who has been absent since October.
Thank you, Dave.
Oh yeah, as part of my NEMA Māori Advisory Committee role, I was able to attend the Civil Defence conference last month, and it was really valuable, and I was pleased to hear that Councillor Collard got a lot out of it as well. It was 3 days and lots of Māori themes right throughout the conference, so I was in my element, but also a lot of technical information as well. Yeah, it's great.
Thank you for that. Just three final things, and then we'll call the meeting. Just did a quick estimate. I think, given the workshops we've had and the discussions, and each of us would have spent about 1,500 hours on our long-term plan for the last little while, just so you know. Just a calculation, just flex, but and when I say us, I'm talking pretty much everyone in this room, but certainly elected members and senior staff who have spent that much time. Just on SNAs, as you're aware, I'm working with Minister with David Samuels to meet up with Willie Jackson and James Shaw. One of the interesting things that I'm finding, which doesn't surprise me, and I'm sure it wouldn't surprise David Kendall, is that while the ministers are receptive and listening and got ears open, can't say the same thing for officials at this stage. So anyway, we'll keep working on that. And finally, Three Waters, I just want to comment on that. I've sent you all an email. There's a Zoom meeting this afternoon at 4 o'clock, which I encourage you to get on listen into. I sat through a national Zoom meeting, local government New Zealand Zoom meeting, and probably had a different and jaundiced view to most people who are optimistic. But I've got to say that having some experience in politics, I'm just not sure that what concerns me most of all is that, well, each group, and there's a number of groups now working on particular issues such as SNAs, such as local government reform, such as district scheme changes and those sorts of things. They're all roading, whatever it might be. What concerns me most of all is that a lot of it's in silos, and a lot of it there's no joining up and considering. Most importantly, the thing that worries me most of all is one of the reasons why we are where we are is because we've underfunded our infrastructure, whatever that might be, in whatever capacity it is, for the last 30 or so years. And parliaments, governments are all responsible, so not pointing the political finger. But what worries me, no one has sat down and said the most important thing we can do collectively as a nation is consider how we're going to fund this going forward over the next 30 and 50 and 70 years. And until they work out a funding program that is affordable from a nation's perspective, and our communities and districts and whatever will fit in, quite honestly, we're going round in circles, in my view. The most fundamental thing you have to do, first of all, is consider the issue of affordability and funding. And that just isn't happening. And so we're having a whole lot of money being spent on talk shows and all sorts of things. Ultimately, we'll get to an end, and then someone will say, well, who the hell's paying? Well, actually, we need to know that first, not last. Anyway, thank you for that. That, I think, as far as I'm concerned, brings us to the end of the Merrill announcements. There'll be a whole new suite of them at the next meeting. But I think we've done very well, and I want to thank you all for your participation and etc. And Kelly, can I ask you to do a closing prayer for us?
Certainly. Yes.
Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whaia tō tātou ariki o ihi karaiti me te aroha, me te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te waiwa tapu. Ake, ake, ake. Amen.
Amen. And there's lunch present, folks.